Good morning and welcome to All People's Church, Unitarian Universalist. My name is Mary Kerwin and I'm here to help lead worship with our guest celebrant, Lori King Nelson, who returns again to our pulpit to preach. Welcome back, Lori. We're grateful and we appreciate having you here. Our service today will also include our small but mighty All People's Church Choir. Our Sunday service is a shared time of worship for all present as we gather for music, spoken words, a time of reflection and inspiration as a religious community. Let us come together in a spirit of compassion and respect for ourselves and others who are attending this service. We especially welcome those who are visiting today. If you haven't done so yet, please sign in at the visitors table located by the front door, where you can be placed on our mailing list to receive weekly emails and our monthly newsletter. And today we observe one of our favorite rituals, our monthly first Sunday potluck luncheon, to be held immediately following the service. You are most welcome to attend the luncheon, even if you did not bring a potluck dish to share. Before we continue on to worship, there are announcements. I have one announcement, two announcements, I think. Our first is a stewardship report from our pledge captain, Michael Zepeda, and our congregational president, Dan Sexton. And they say about our pledge drive. We have pledge cards from about half of our households. Please turn your card in so we can make a final budget. There are pledge cards in the foyer. The pledges that we've received so far are up 15%. That's great. Thank you all who have turned theirs in. Together, we will reach our goal. If you have any questions about pledging, please talk to Dan Sexton. And there is a cake for potluck to celebrate our pledge drive. Everybody enjoy the cake. We have a community garden here at All People's Church. Avoid the rush, lease your garden plot today, grow your own fruits and vegetables. You can see Joel Bailey for more details. And now, please settle comfortably for our musical prelude.
Thank you for that beautiful prelude. Good morning. I was telling Mary yesterday that when I left here week before last, that evening I was exposed to COVID, and surely I tested positive for it several days later. I did not expose any of you, for which I am so grateful, and I was able to be over it in order to be back here. But the weirdest things happen, and I think any of you who have already had COVID understand. I did not understand until I had it, the kind of impact that it has on your mind and your body, and how long it actually takes you to physically recover. So, if I'm a little slow today, I'm just going to blame it on COVID, whether it really is that or not, okay? Neha Sandhir is senior editor at Illumination Integrated Publications. She holds advanced degrees in engineering, business, technology, and marketing. She's a little bit educated. Ms. Sandhir is also an accomplished poet focusing on inner peace and spiritual growth. Her poem called Acceptance. Anatomy of humankind, varying like a spectrum, knowing oneself's conscious, a solitary immersion for inner peace, a spiritual journey that begins from being human to accepting the spirit self within. Embracing this sublime oneness, one's own existence as human and spirit self, with eternal gratitude.
We invite you to stand in body or spirit for the lighting of our chalice, our opening hymn, and spoken affirmation. Today's chalice lighting is about a spark of hope. If ever there was a time for a candle in the darkness, this would be it. Using a spark of hope, kindle the flame of love, ignite the light of peace, and feed the flames of justice. And please now join in singing our opening hymn, number 1045, There is a Balm in Gilead.
To
And our spoken affirmation. Love is the doctrine of this church. The quest of truth is our sacrament, and service is our prayer. To dwell together in peace, to seek knowledge and freedom, to serve others in community, to the end that all souls shall grow into harmony with creation. Thus do we covenant with one another. And we invite the young for all ages.
Good morning. Now this is like my little chihuahua who is always the last one in from the backyard. I'm going as fast as I can. Yes, little legs. So I was hoping that putting this here was not going to be a mistake on my part, because all of it is really fragile. I'm gonna pass it around to you. It's kind of heavy, isn't it? Isn't it beautiful? This was given to me by a dear friend in Japan. And I've had it for a lot of years. I lived in Japan for quite a few years, and I left there in 1989, way before any of y'all were here. Well, I used to keep it on a table in my bedroom on a glass that looked just like this. Which probably wasn't the wisest idea since I have cats. Right? You know where I'm going with this, huh? What? It has cracks in it, yes. Yes. But you know what? It wasn't my cat that knocked it over. It was me. I was making my bed, and I backed up a little too far, and I hit this piece, and it rolled off the table, and I couldn't see it on the other side, but I heard everything shatter. The glass, the ball, everything, right? You can feel the cracks.
Like, look at that. It's like white and brown.
Ah. So, nowadays, I keep it in a much safer location where I can't touch it. My cats don't seem to care about it. I no longer keep it sitting on the mate to the beautiful glass that broke. Instead, I keep rocks in this that people give me, small rocks. Well, maybe I'll bring those next time because all of them have a story. So sometimes we make choices like I did, and it was a poor choice to leave this sitting where I left it. Because in my head, I felt it. I knew that something could happen to it, that I could break it. And something did happen to it. And I cried, like I really cried, because it meant so much to me. And it hurt so much that I had been the reason that this broke. But as I sat and put it back together, never to be the same as it was, I realized that I could have made the choice to just leave it broken and swept it up and thrown it in the trash. But I didn't, because it's important that when we make mistakes, we do our very best to fix them. And we do our very best not to make that same mistake a second time, although it could have happened this morning with this here. Any one of us me most likely, could have hit it and knocked it off. But you can see that it will never be exactly the way it was when it was first given to me. But that does not mean it's not worthy of my love and care and my desire for it to be whole again. So I want you to remember that not only for yourselves, if you make a mistake, because we all do, we're human, that we can make up for that. We can make things right again. And if someone else makes a mistake, we offer them the opportunity to make that right with us also. Y'all have a fantastic week, and thanks for listening. And rocks are next.
Now,
This one here, this says, "My beloved is mine, and I am his." Thank you. It's about my cat.
our offertory message today is a report about how we're making a difference in the community. Earlier this year, we sent a check for $968 to Raíces, the Refugee and Immigrant Center for Education and Legal Services. They were our designated Share the Plate recipient for October, November, and December. And at the end of March, just last week, we ended our first quarter collection to our Share the Plate. We'll be presenting a check for $939 to the Center for Transforming Lives here in Fort Worth. And as you've heard from the pulpit in recent months, Joe Burnham and others are getting ready for the big Don't Forget to Feed Me fundraiser called the Hungry Hound Hustle, which is a 5K 1-mile race on Saturday, April 22nd. And last but not least, we've also sent $147 to Eastside Community Assistance, representing the proceeds from our Valentine's Day fundraiser in February. Please, everyone, give yourselves a pat on the back for your generous donations. Pat on the back. Going forward into the second quarter for our Share the Plate program, our new designated recipient is the Texas Unitarian Universalist Justice Ministry, our statewide network in Austin, whose mission is to educate and advocate effectively for public policies that reflect our UU values. Let there be an offering to sustain and strengthen this place, which is sacred to so many of us, a community of memory and hope, for we are now the keepers of the dream. The offering will be gratefully received. Will the ushers and the choir please come forward?
This morning we're going to sing for you a couple of spirituals. I want to give you a little bit of background about spirituals. Spirituals were handed down orally, so they were repeated from generation to generation. And they weren't written down till after the Civil Wars because reading and writing were not encouraged and sometimes disciplined within the Negro slaves. So spirituals were their way of handing down information to younger generations and to each other. So they spoke repeatedly, the chants were repeated, and the messages were short and sweet. So today we're going to sing, "Didn't My Lord Deliver Daniel?" And there's an underlying repeat, "Didn't my Lord deliver Daniel? Didn't my Lord deliver Daniel? Didn't my Lord deliver Daniel? Then why not deliver me?" Oftentimes they spoke about short stories that they had heard from the Bibles that was taught to them as slaves, and they repeated those messages in short versions, usually with enlightenment on freeing them. So many of the songs were, the second one is, "Soon I will be done, soon I will be done, and soon I will be living with God." They were songs about the Bible. There were also songs about being freed from slavery.
From the Soon I will be done, 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 troubles of the world, troubles of the world, soon I will be done, troubles of the world, but all deliverance, soon I will be done, soon I will be done, soon I will be done, troubles of the world, the world, soon I will be done, troubles of the world, Lord, all deliverance, soon I will be done, no more weeping and a wailing, no more weeping and a wailing, no more weeping and a wailing, I'm going to live with soon I will be done, 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 troubles of the world, soon I will be done, troubles of the world, I come to live with soon I will be done, soon I will be done, I want oh yes, I want to meet my brother. Yes, I want to meet Jesus. I'm going to live with soon I will be done, soon I will be done, soon I will be troubles of the world, soon I will be done with the troubles I'm going to live with soon I will be done, soon I will be troubles of the world, soon I will be done with the troubles I'm going
Again, wow. Just the beauty of that just brings tears to my eyes. Thank you so much for this music. In the Feasting on the Word commentary, Gilberto Collazo tells a story of a stranger who came into a small town one day and stood in the center of the town square. He had on a very strange coat. It was black, and sewn onto it were patches of cloth of all sizes, shapes, and colors. As word spread of this strange visitor, the townspeople gathered around in a curious silence. Finally, a brave soul dared to ask about the significance of the unique coat. The stranger immediately began to point to different patches and explained they represented the sins of different people of the town. Embarrassed, some people left the square. Indignant, others shook their heads in denial of the accusations. After explaining every patch and denouncing every sin, the man turned around and headed out of town. On his back was a dark patch of cloth that covered almost the entire coat. The townspeople wondered out loud what and whose sin that patch represented. Suddenly a voice rang out loud and clear. That represents his own sin, For he is willing to point out the shortcomings of others, yet fails to see his own.
At this time in our service, we pause to honor and to give time and attention to those things that are most important to us. We gather here for healing and for peace in our hearts, and to honor our time together with the shared stories and the news from our congregation. Each week, there's a journal outside the entrance to the sanctuary where you can write a message of memory or hope. Also, at any time during our service, you are welcome to come forward and light a candle in our meditation center here at the side of the chancel. Today, from our Book of Memory and Hope, we include a message from Paul Shatman, who has a book recommendation for us. It's a new biography of Abraham Lincoln called And There Was Light. And Paul finds this particularly meaningful. I think one reason because Abraham Lincoln was a contemporary of our theologian and preacher Theodore Parker. Also, please keep in mind our sister congregation, the UU Church of Little Rock. They opened their doors yesterday to provide sandwiches and drinks in the neighborhood and to help the citizens with tornado recovery in the wake of Friday's devastating storm. And let us also include in our circle of concern those beyond our immediate community. Let us open our minds and hearts to the place of quiet, to the silent prayer for the healing of pain, and the soft, gentle coming of love. Please now settle comfortably and pause for a brief period of quiet meditation while Misha uplifts us with music.
I want you to know that as I read the story from Gilberto Palazzo, I am always reminded that the biggest patch is on my own back that I can't see. And I will be a work in progress for the rest of my life, trying to look over my shoulder and see what I'm missing. Also, please tell your children that I did not get this tattoo for my cat. I was joking when I said that. My kids tell me that that's why I did it, but my beloved is mine and I am his has deeper meaning, of course, than that. Mr. China comes to Washington today. With an exaggerated smile, Laura Ingraham perpetuated the racism and xenophobia that continues to be a larger and louder blight on humanity. Ms. Ingraham didn't concern herself with the fact that the CEO of TikTok is Singaporean and not Chinese. But if you want to maintain a high level of anti-Asian sentiment among your viewership, Mr. Singapore just doesn't pack the same punch. She was just so, I don't know, proud of her disrespectful statement that it made me a little sick to my stomach. Hey, Laura, his name is Mr. Chu, and he has an MBA from Harvard University, but she already knew that. If you watched any of the hearings, you were most likely taken aback by the disrespect shown by our congressional leaders, as well as their lack of knowledge about how social media, the internet, and algorithms work. As much as we would like to blame China for our national obsession with TikTok, it's not them, it's us. I use TikTok on a daily basis. It's one component of a larger social media presence for the Dallas Furniture Bank that includes Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, and Pinterest. TikTok is by far my favorite platform because it allows me to build a following that drives traffic to my nonprofit. And I have fun doing it. The business element is the easy part. It's the personal element of social media that can drag us into the weeds of unacceptance. That's where the noise begins. Now, we've noticed the increase in hate speech, and not just the number of voices, but the intensity of their rhetoric. We're told to be very afraid of drag queens reading to our children because they are demonic groomers whose agenda is clearly to make our children gay. We're told that books which address racial and gender differences are harmful to our young people because they are written to brainwash them. Gender-affirming care mutilates children. Abortions murder those that are born alive. Murderers are coming across the border to replace us. China started the COVID pandemic to kill off the global population, apparently as their dastardly plan for world dominance. Mass shootings are deep fakes by liberals who want to take our guns, and transgender people wanting to be transgender just for the sports advantage. Yeah, that's a head scratcher. There's more. There's so much more. The Southern Poverty Law Center has identified the following as major conspiracy theories embraced and amplified by the same voices bringing book bans. Chemtrails. Did you know that you're being chemically subjugated by airplanes flying across and leaving chemtrails, which are actually just like water, right? Martial law, Sharia law, FEMA concentration camps, foreign troops on U.S. soil. Think back to Operation Jade Helm, which was a dual theory of a takeover of the U.S. and our guns. What was the name of that movie? Wolverines? Door-to-door gun confiscations. Now, really, I'm imagining a guy with a clipboard showing up at my door asking for my guns and wanting to know which energy provider I use. 9/11 as a government plot to trigger a crisis. Population control. A Death Star floating in space. The North American Union as a merging of the US, Canada, and Mexico into one country. And this is barely scratching the surface. There's so much noise, and it is intentionally crafted to keep us from loving and fully accepting each other. Fear and hate driving a large wedge between you and I. Last year, I officiated the wedding of my granddaughter. She married her high school sweetheart. There were people who refused to celebrate with us that day because her husband, one of the kindest and most caring people I know, is transgender. Later in the year, I officiated the funeral of someone who had always been kind and respectful to my son, who is transgender. A few months after the funeral, I saw that the spouse had posted a sweet and heart-wrenching sentiment onto her husband's Facebook page. And as I scrolled down through his timeline, I saw that it was filled with far right-wing friends, anti-Semitism, racist and homophobic content and sentiments. My heart dropped as I saw one post after another denigrating the poor, the rich, Jewish people, indigenous people, queer people, young people, black people. I think you get the picture. It was an absolute hate fest among people unconcerned with how others are threatened and murdered by that hate. Hey, it's just words, right? We're just exercising our right to free speech, was one of the comments made in response to being called out. As if what we say is not also what is going on in our heart. I'm still coming to terms with this, and I'm having to think hard about how I would have approached his funeral had I known his true feelings. And that's just me being an incomplete human. I'm working on it. The National Institute of Health published a 2020 study of the impact of hate speech spread on social media. Groups targeted by hate speech experienced higher levels of anxiety, fear, and loneliness, and lower levels of self-esteem, goal clarity, and academic and job performance. I've never doubted that living in a constant state of fear and anxiety negatively impacts emotional and physical health. It does. And there's severe trauma that can be passed down through generations. Just think of chattel slavery that included African and indigenous people in this country. What was surprising to me in this study was that researchers also identified negative physical and emotional health impacts on those who disseminate and amplify the hate speech. The people causing so much trauma to others were also damaging themselves. Paul Tillich says, life moves against itself through aggression, hate, and despair. We are wont to condemn self-love, but what we really mean to condemn is contrary to self-love. It is that mixture of selfishness and self-hate that permanently pursues us, that prevents us from loving others and that prohibits us from losing ourselves in the love with which we are loved eternally. He who is able to love himself is able to love others also. He who has learned to overcome self-contempt has overcome his contempt for others. But the depth of our separation lies in just the fact that we are not capable of great and merciful divine love towards ourselves. On the contrary, in each of us there is an instinct of self-destruction, which is as strong as our instinct of self-preservation. In our tendency to abuse and destroy others, there is an open or hidden tendency to abuse and destroy ourselves. Cruelty towards others is always also cruelty toward ourselves. Now, granted, when I read the research results, my first impulse was to think about karma. But that response brings no resolution, no solution, no love or acceptance. It brings no peace to a loud and harm-filled world. Each day I live, I find there is more room for growth in me. Every time I feel I have become self-aware, I'm confronted with thoughts that highlight the constraints of my soul. There is just so much work to be done, and so many days when I'm unsure if I'm up to the task. In speaking to the third UU principle, Reverend Rob Hardies of All Souls Church Unitarian writes, "Growth in spirit measures the spaciousness of one's own soul, its volume, its capacity, its size. We need souls that can take in the world in all its complexity and diversity, yet still maintain our integrity. We need souls that can love and be in relationship with all of this complexity. Instead of fight or flight, we need a spiritual posture of embrace." Reverend Hardies, I just said that I'm struggling with that whole funeral thing. I'm seriously frustrated with myself as I continue to learn to embrace everyone. Standing firm in love is hard. In an article titled "Grieving as Sacred Space," Richard Rohr defines liminal space as a unique spiritual position where human beings hate to be, but where the biblical God is always leading them. He adds, "It is when you have left the tried and true, but have not yet been able to replace it with anything else. It is when you are finally out of the way. It is when you are in between your old comfort zone and any possible new answer. If you are not trained in how to hold anxiety, how to live with ambiguity, how to entrust and wait, you will run. Anything to flee from this terrible cloud of unknowing." He's right. I don't know how to make my soul more expansive so that I can embrace these people who hurt others. And that makes me very uncomfortable because I feel I should know. But something Rohr and Hardies agree on is that we don't automatically know how to have a spiritual posture of embrace. We learn as we move through that liminal space between the old and the new. I preached once on that time when Jesus was traveling around the countryside, or unfamiliar lands, and learning about those who lived and thought differently from him, and how disrespectful he was to the woman who asked him to heal her daughter And he said no, because she was from Canaan and he was only there to help the Israelites. And then he basically calls her a dog in front of everyone. Yeah, that wasn't a good look on him. But he learned something that day about having a spiritual posture of embrace. I know he had to have slowed down, thought for a minute, battling between what he had been taught and what he knew was right. He was still figuring out his ministry, standing in that liminal space, silencing the voices of those around him and deciding that his ministry would be based on love and acceptance of everyone. Well, I'm obviously not Jesus. And also, Jesus never had to deal with social media content designed to make us afraid of anyone different from us and built to circle the globe in a matter of seconds. But he knew the noise. I'm sure everyone trying to bring a message of unity and acceptance back then had people yelling at them too. Billy Wade, in Escape into Life, writes, "Acceptance does not equal agreement. I may disagree with someone while accepting the person for who she or he is. I have a close friend whose political views differ from mine. When we tackle issues, recognizing that many are volatile, we do so without political rhetoric. We discuss the issue at hand without accusations and finger pointing. Acceptance doesn't aim to discount who we are, but rather to honor everyone as equal, viable, and valuable." Now that's difficult, but doable. I see this kind of response often on TikTok. And while the commenter to someone's original post might be rude, cruel, or trying to share non-fact-based information, the original poster offers a fact-based response and then moves on. They aren't entertaining the noise or hate. Instead, they've provided facts to facilitate a real discussion should the commenter wish to engage in a civil conversation. And I want to thank Gen Z and the millennials for that, because they're teaching us huge lessons about how to respond. I know I can never be louder than the Marjorie Taylor Greene hate speech variety pack. And I don't want to be, because hate disturbs the peace I am trying to grow in my mind. I do want to learn to approach each person I encounter with my mind and heart open to acceptance, knowing that the hurt that they cause others is also hurting them. I want to be focused on peace and healing for all of us, but I doubt I'll be silent. I know my limits. I'm going to leave you today with a story that is the very essence of how we are to respond to the noise from the Happening Out television network. Florida has become a scary place for drag queens, and Texas, and Idaho, well, across America. Drag queens have been pulled into the culture war from the radical right to sell a fear message to parents that drag queens are sexualizing their children, and worse. The phrase grooming has become a common reference of drag queen story hours at libraries and other locations by Governors Ron DeSantis and Texas Governor Greg Abbott, and more. Here in South Florida, the restaurant Our House in Miami's Wynwood district has been threatened by Florida for loss of liquor licenses because of their long-running drag Sunday brunch. There have been protests, sometimes even violent ones, in locations across America at drag queen events like these. So when the pastor of the world's largest queer church announced that they would host a series of drag queen Bible story hours, it received Queer News Tonight's attention. Sunshine Cathedral, the world's largest queer church located in Fort Lauderdale, will host 4 holiday Bible story hours for Advent. Advent is a month-long pre-Christmas holiday celebration observed in most Christian denominations as a time of expectant waiting and preparation for both the celebration of the Nativity of Christ at Christmas and the return of Christ at the second coming. It literally means the beginning of the holiday season. Senior minister, Reverend Dr. Jarrell Watkins, will host 4 drag queen Bible story hours every Wednesday from starting November 30th and running through December. This was this last year. He will present in glam drag as Reverend Dr. Dragvina Scriptura. Nice, right? She will read fun and relevant Bible stories with a new and interesting twist. The Drag Queen Bible Story Hour will be appropriate for all ages. When Queer News Tonight asked Watkins why a program like this would be planned, he said, "It's Advent. Christian faith is welcoming to the entire queer community, and drag queens are some of the best and most entertaining representations of that community." This is also a statement in support of the art of drag, the drag community, and the wholesomeness of drag story hours. The 4 programs will feature 4 drag personas of hope, peace, joy, and love, which are traditional Advent themes. Reverend Dr. Dragvina Scriptura Stories from the Bible will show that gender bending exists, and there was even drag in biblical times. Other themes promised are that both religion and gender are largely performative, that drag can be empowering, and that makes it holy. Even the articles of wigs and makeup included in Bible stories show that they don't make a person good or bad, but they can make you feel more fabulous. Reverend Dr. Dragvina Scriptura promises to deliver a fun time in experiencing drag in an entirely new way. And thanks be to God for that. Will you join us in the closing hymn, number 1014, Answering the Call of Love?
We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again.
Do not be dismayed by the brokenness in the world. All things break, and all things can be mended. Not with time, as they say, but with intention. So go, love intentionally, extravagantly, unconditionally. The broken world waits in darkness for the light that is you.
The service has ended. Everyone is invited to join us for potluck in Coleman.